Hi, this is Mark Arnold with another episode of Fun Ideas Podcast. And today we have an author who's written a book about the amazing Criswell. This is Ed Canfield. How are you, sir?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well too.
Yeah.
So, why Criswell? I mean,
Well, around late '90s, year 2000, um, I had learned of him through the Plan 9 from Outer Space, Ed Wood's Plan 9 from Outer Space, because he does the intro there and then narrates the whole movie. And then the film Ed Wood, Tim Burton's Ed Wood, the
right.
biography, he was featured in that as well. And I just thought, hey, that guy's kind of nutty, kind of wacky, eccentric, so I want to know more about him. And then a friend of mine loaned me one of his books of predictions. Criswell predicts to the year 2000. And in it, he predicts that the world would end on August the 18th, 1999. So I was reading this book in the year 2000 after that date had passed. So, he missed his big prediction there. And then, and also just his predictions in that book were just outrageous and, just off the wall stuff. And I just said, I need to know more about this guy.
In anything in the book, because I've seen the book, but I've never actually looked through it before.
Mhm.
Was there anything that had the remotest uh that actually happened, or no, is all way off out of
I
left field?
mean, loosely,
Okay.
some of his general predictions, he predicted that we would go away from hard money, and start using electronic credit and things like that before that happened. He claims that he predicted that Kennedy wouldn't run for president for his second term because something would happen
Mm,
in November. But he kind of made that claim after the fact. So
okay.
there was never anything that he was spot on.
I get it. Ever, or
Mhm.
just in this book? Because that was one of,
I would say ever.
oh wow, that's really sad.
Yeah.
Because my dad knew about Criswell because he grew up in the Los Angeles area, so he knew about the
Hmm.
show and everything like that. And I used to ask him, I mean, did he ever get anything right or accurate? And my dad says, I don't think so.
No.
So, I figured
Nothing
if you're
like
doing the
this.
research, you might find, well, he was accurate
Mhm.
on this one thing,
Yeah.
but
He claimed that he was he claimed he had 87% accuracy,
mhm,
and which I don't know how that was fact checked or anything like that. Um, and then he would, like, on blurbs on his books, it would say things that after the fact that, oh yeah, I did predict that this would happen. So it was kind of an after the fact thing.
okay. All right, I will ask more about him, but let me ask a little bit about you just to kind of find out why you wrote this book and everything like that. Have you written any other books or anything like that?
No, this is my first published book. And initially, when I started getting interested in Criswell, I wanted to write a screenplay similar to the Tim Burton's Ed Wood, kind of a biopic of Criswell. And then I started working on that for a while, and I was like, well, maybe this would be better as a documentary.
Mm,
And then kind of approached that way, pitched it a few times to different people. HBO, I have a very nice rejection letter from HBO. They're very nice about it.
mhm,
Um, and then I was just like, well, maybe I should do a book. And
mhm,
then I would, as I would do research or find out new information, and as life permitted, I would work on it.
mhm,
And then I pitched it a few times over the years, and then uh, the pandemic gave me the opportunity because I knew that I would just need like 2 months at a time to sit down and do nothing but focus on it, do some more research, fill in some holes, and get it to a publishable format.
mhm.
And so that's what I did for 2 months of the pandemic, and it worked out. I sent out a few pitches on it, and it got picked up pretty quickly by Head Press Publishing. So,
Wow, very good. So, all told, from when you originally had the concept of doing a film to getting the book completed, how long have you been like working on this?
23 years, because it was
Wow.
about the year 2000 when I started, like, on the original idea and stuff.
Mhm,
So, yeah, but I would say 20 years of working on it, and of course it was off and on. It wasn't like I was focused on it
Right.
all the time. It was just when time afforded it, you
Hmm.
know.
And did you start off just by finding people who knew him and stuff like that, basically?
I did, and of course around 2000 as the internet was starting to become more commonplace and things like that, and I started researching there, any kind of magazines, newspaper articles I could find, and then I contacted people that had known him, through the internet, and the internet was huge in the research over the past 20 years on it. Um, I started looking in like the online newspaper archives
Hmm.
when I first started researching, and found some pretty good information then. And then on the last round, when I decided to finish it up, I got back on newspaper archive, and it's just exploded how much more is there now, and it really helped fill in the holes and you know get it to a good place there. So the internet was a big help, and emails, emailing people and things like that to get information.
Hmm. I noticed that you got a lot of newspaper ads of personal appearances Criswell made over the years and things like that. Um, uh, just curiosity about him then. I guess you can kind of tell me a little bit about him and how he ended up becoming this prophet, as it were. Because it doesn't seem like it, in reading through the book that that's what was his original plan was. It looked like he was trying to be more of an actor or something else, because he kind of dabbled in a lot of different things. So tell me a little bit about him.
Well, he was born in Princeton, Indiana on August the 18th, 1907. And then after he finished up high school there, he went to Cincinnati and got a teaching certificate because he wanted to be a teacher at that time. And then that's kind of how he ended up with the name Criswell. His real name is Jerron Charles King, and his mother's maiden name was Criswell. So somehow, though, on his teaching certificate, they ended up putting Jerron Charles Criswell. And
Mhm.
so he didn't want to mess with having to get the paperwork redone or whatever, and just kind of stuck with that Criswell then at that point. And then he did a little bit of teaching in Cincinnati. He also claimed that he was an ambulance jockey, things like that, just whatever he could do. Worked for some newspapers and things, writing for newspapers. And then in the mid 30s, he moved to New York City. And his plan then was to hit Broadway, become an actor, become a star. And he developed a play based on the picture of Dorian Gray. And he would play Dorian Gray in some of the productions of it, off Broadway plays. Um, and then he also claimed that at the time he worked in financial forecasting on Wall Street and did some radio work as well, and more newspaper work and things. And then that he said that that was when he kind of started to predict, because he claims that at one point in New York he made a prediction that, well, they ran out of financial news, and so he had to make up some things, and he made up some prediction, some random thing, and something happened that was closely related to that prediction.
Hmm.
And so that kind of stuck with him then. And so he didn't become the big star on Broadway that he thought he was going to be. Um, but he did write 3 books along with his wife, who he met in New York doing off Broadway plays and stuff. And her desire was to become a Broadway, star as well. And
Hmm.
so they collaborated on 3 books on how to succeed on Broadway and in Tin Pan Alley and things like that.
Hmm.
Which is interesting because they really had no success. They were never even on Broadway. They were doing off Broadway stuff.
Right.
But then in 1940, him and his wife, Halo Meadows, was one of her names. She had many names like he did and was constantly changing them. Her original name was Myrtle Louise Stonecipher, is her actual name. But she would go with names like Halo Meadows or Louise Howard. She wrote plays under the pen name of Louise Howard. But in 1940, they decided to take the Dorian Gray play on the road and then travel to Hollywood and end up in Hollywood. And they did. They played some, did the play across country. And then when they got to Hollywood, they claimed themselves as Broadway stars and put on a production of the Dorian Gray play as well. And one of those productions, they had a fellow named Norvell the astrologer. He was an astrologer to the stars, kind of one of the early famous astrologers. And he was in the play playing Dorian Gray. And so I think that's kind of started Criswell to say, oh, okay, there's something in this, astrology and things like that. And after they didn't do well in Hollywood as far as the play goes, it played for a while, but it didn't stick. Didn't make them stars or anything. He started a spiritualist church, and which he would do out of their apartment. They would have meetings on Wednesdays and Sundays and things like that. And then he started getting more into that spiritualism and mediums and things like that, and slowly started into the predictions. Then in the 50s, after the war or during the war years is when he mostly did that, was get into the spiritualist church and stuff. And he would claim himself as Dr. Criswell or Reverend Charles King Criswell, things like that, constantly changing his name. So then in the early 50s, he did start writing predictions for newspapers and things like that. And that started kind of his popularity to a certain extent. He ended up getting a television show, early television in 1955 in Los Angeles, local show there. And that's really when he started going by Criswell and just going all in on the predictions. He was also selling Criswell's Family Formula vitamins as well. That was and that's kind of how he started getting the airtime. Was he bought airtime to advertise the vitamins and then would do predictions as well.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I know he was, well, I guess you could call him a celebrity, but I'll phrase it this way. So he met different people along the line, like Ed Wood, and he was friends with Mae West and things like that. How did he come across these people? Is it because of the TV show, or is it prior to that?
It was a TV show, was a lot of it. I think he met Ed Wood, was a director for the television show for a short time, and they had different directors for the show, but Ed Wood was one of them. So that's where they met. He claims that he knew Mae West back in the Broadway days and that he was her publicist for a while then. And he may have been, but I haven't seen any record of that. But so and then she moved to Hollywood, as well. And she was into spiritualism and astrology and mediums and channeling and things like that as well. So, she, believed that he could foresee the future.
Was there any other like celebrities that consulted him on a regular basis that you found in your research, or no?
No, not really consulted him, came to him for advice or anything. He was friends with Vampira because of Plan 9 from Outer Space. They met during that and they remained friends as well. He didn't ever really do that. He didn't ever have people, pay him to, read their palm or anything like that. And one of the reasons for that is that astrology and fortune telling and things like that were illegal. They made it illegal and you could be fined for it. And Norvell actually had to go to court because he did a reading for an undercover policewoman. And so then he got charged with the fortune telling ordinance, or ordinance against fortune telling, and ended up paying a fine.
Was that in California or New York?
That was in Los Angeles.
Oh, okay.
That was in Los Angeles, and that was on the books for a long time. And people claim, it was against their religious freedom and stuff, that they weren't able to do that. Yeah. So it eventually was taken off the books, the fortune telling ordinance.
Yeah. I was going to say, because I've seen lots of fortune tellers around the state of California, so I go, must have been removed at some point. So, excuse me. Let's see. Did he do? Like I said, I kind of thumbed through the book, so some things are kind of a little spotty about. Somewhere along the line, you mentioned that he interviewed H.G. Wells. How did that come about?
That was in New York. Okay. When he was working in newspaper in New York.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's when he interviewed him.
And was it done for any particular publication, or what was
I
the?
was never able to find any publication that had it. So, it's another one of those things that he claims. So, maybe it did happen, maybe it didn't. And there was a quote from HUL saying something about Criswell foresees the future clearly or something like that. So,
Mhm,
he was aware of him, and then they probably did meet.
mhm. And you mentioned Fate magazine. Did he write for Fate magazine too, or was it just
He
newspaper column?
he did write for Fate for 3 or 4 issues.
Okay.
He was going to be a regular feature, but it just kind of faded away. It never really happened. But he did have some articles in Fate. And there was also another science fiction pulp magazine called Spaceway Science Fiction, which he had some articles in as well. He eventually, his predictions were in the National Enquirer and all of those kind of tabloid newspaper magazines as well in the 60s and 70s.
Hmm. And did he write all these himself, or did he have like a staff that helped him out, or anything like that? No.
um, his wife claimed that she wrote a lot of them.
Okay.
I think that he did the majority of the work. I know his art director for the television show, her brother was a typist for him for a while because he just got tired of typing. So I guess he would dictate and the young man would type them out for him. He claimed in some newspaper trade publications, there's listings for syndicated columns, and in it he claims, Criswell predicts column, Criswell editor in chief, and then assistant editor, a fellow named Charles Philip Wireman, which I've never found any record of this guy. And then in the articles he did in the Spaceway Science Fiction magazines, there was also 2 articles in there. One was like a biography of Criswell written by this Charles F. Wireman,
Hmm.
but the writing style and everything was like identical to the way Criswell wrote. So it was another name of him, I think.
Right.
So, but yeah, I think he did, and he did a lot, considering all the newspapers and everything. Thousands, tens of thousands, probably of predictions.
Hmm. Now, did he suffer any issues? Like sometimes, uh, certain people that are psychic, or they'll do things like bending spoons or various supernatural type things, and then somebody else will come along and declare them a fraud or something like that. Do you ever encounter anything like that, or is he generally accepted throughout his career as this is what he does and it's all right? It's okay.
Well, yeah, I think he was generally just accepted. I think the majority of people saw it as it was an act,
Yep.
which, and he had a very commanding presence and voice and things. So people paid attention and listened. And that's one thing he claimed is, you wear nice clothes and speak with a strong voice, people are going to listen to you and they're going to believe what you say, no matter what you say.
Hmm.
There was times he kind of admitted that he was a fraud and that he couldn't. He says that he had the ability to predict the future until he started making money for it, and then he lost the ability, but he kept doing it.
Hmm.
And the persona was not just when he was on stage or anything like that or performing. He was Criswell all the time. He spoke that way, dressed that way, and just lived it.
Hmm.
It wasn't just a character.
Right. Did he have to do anything, whether it's acting or not, doesn't really matter, but did he have to do any special preparation or anything to do his predictions, or did you just come out and start talking?
He just came out and just was very matter of fact about it.
Okay.
And then he was on Johnny Carson and Jack Parr, some of the late night shows as well. And there's a couple of videos of him on there, and he has like 3x5 cards that he has them written down, and he just sits down and says, "We're all interested in the future because that's where we're going to be. And my first prediction is I predict blah 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 blah." And then Carson would make a comment, then he'd flip the card and just, read the next prediction that bed bugs are going to invade Omaha or something like that. And just very straight, like this is what it is. And of course, Carson played it, and Jack Parr as well. as a joke. They would get their
Karnak and
little
stuff. Yeah.
right, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think Karnak came from Criswell. Was
Probably.
Criswell inspired.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, so I noticed also in reading through is sometimes some of his Criswell's live performances, he had them tailored specifically to have just women in the audience. So how did he do tailor his performance for just an all female audience?
Well, he loved women, and I think he saw himself as a bit as of a ladies' man. Although I think he played both sides of the fence. I think he was bisexual as
Yeah.
well, which caused some problems in his marriage. But he respected women, loved women, and a lot of his predictions were focused towards women. Like this is the fashions for next year, or
Right.
this is what you're going to find in a husband, and things like that. And I think part of that is that they just um he just tailored it that way, and I think that and women enjoyed it.
Hmm. Okay. Um, and then I have never seen one of his TV shows, to be honest, but my dad said he used to see it on occasion, and it was
Hmm.
basically him sitting in front of a monitor, just like I am, just kind of saying his predictions. Um, do any of those shows still exist, or like on YouTube or anything like that? Or is pretty much
Not
everything
any
wiped?
of his original Los Angeles show. I haven't been
Okay.
able to find any.
Okay.
Um, at that time, they really weren't recording them.
Right.
The shows they had like Kinescope, which was a very fragile, format, and I had read that that was used for syndication in some other markets, but I haven't been able to locate any of
Okay.
those. And then as far as uh the stage setup was like that, and like Plan 9, how it opens with him sitting there at the desk,
Right.
that's pretty much what the show looked like, with the Criswell
Yeah.
Predicts logo coming up and everything. And I think that, came from Ed Wood's direction,
Hmm.
since he helped direct the show as well at
Hmm.
one point. There are some episodes of Carson, couple on YouTube,
Hmm.
that have Criswell on there, although a lot of those were lost as well
Right.
because they recorded over videotape at the time,
Yes.
so there was a lot of Carson stuff that was lost.
Hmm. How long did did Criswell do his show?
About 3 years total.
Okay.
He was on from like 55 to 57 for 2 years there, and then he did a little comeback in like 58 to 59 on a
Okay.
different station, local station
Okay.
there.
Yeah, that predates me, so that's why I was asking. Yeah.
Yeah, me
Uh,
too.
yeah. So I was kind of curious about it, but I kind of figured it would probably be similar to what we see in the intro in Ed Wood because,
Mhm.
um, now I know he's friends with Ed Wood, like what you're saying, but did he at that point, Criswell, think that this is the beginning of a new career, and did he try to become an actor more again, or what happened at that point?
I think he did. I think he saw it that way, that it was a way to be a star and an actor. He did appear in Ed Wood's next film. It was originally called Revenge of the Dead, and it wasn't released during Ed Wood's or Criswell's lifetime, and it
Hmm.
wasn't released until like 86 or 87
Hmm.
under Night of the Ghouls. And Criswell has a little bit of a larger role in it. He does the introduction as well. This time, though, rising up from a coffin, and then it does the intro, and then he narrates, and then he appears at the end as someone that's come back from the dead to
Hmm.
exact revenge for the dead, and so a little larger role.
Right.
Um, but that never got released, so that was probably his acting career didn't help him that much.
Right.
He made one more film appearance in a film called Orgy of the Dead that Ed Wood had written, and was directed by AC Stevens,
Hmm.
and that was in like 65, and so that was his last film appearance.
I see. And I assume doing your research, or you probably saw it anyway, the Tim Burton Ed Wood film.
Mhm.
Uh, do you see? do you feel that the events of the movie and the portrayal were pretty accurate to Criswell and everybody else, or did they take some liberties with that?
They took a little bit of liberties, but they were portrayed well. And a lot of people, like there's some people quoted in the book talking about people that actually knew Ed Wood and knew Criswell and Vampire and things, and like the actors nailed the characters. They did a great job portraying the characters. And of course, it's not a factual, actual,
Right.
account.
Right.
It's,
Yeah.
it's got a little bit of spin on it, and things. But I don't think that's I don't see a problem with that. That's just the nature of it.
Hmm.
That it's not going to be exactly accurate.
Okay. Because if memory serves, I haven't seen Ed Wood movie for a while, but it seemed like once they all did those films, they were kind of like a gang. They kind of like if he was friends with vampiros because of these films. Did they hang out just as friends, just on a regular basis, even when they weren't shooting films and things like that?
They did. Edward and Criswell hung out a lot together, and also Paul Marco, who was in Plan 9 from Outer Space as the scared cop. He was
Right.
also in Night of the Ghouls, and he was in Bride of the Monster as well. And him and Criswell were really good friends. They hung around together a lot, up until Criswell passed away in 1982. They were friends, and they would go out to drink, to dinner and things like that, and do some traveling together and things like that.
Hmm.
Um, Vampira, she would see Criswell just occasionally. But in the early days, like when they were making the films, they hung out together and partied together, and really did it up.
Hmm. I know, like you said, you interviewed Vampira, with the actress who played Vampira, and who were some of the other people you interviewed, and was it hard to track down people to interview?
It was really hard to track down people. One of the people I didn't get to interview was Paul Marco.
Hmm.
I went to California for a work project, and I had planned to meet with Paul and interview him through a friend, and he passed away the day before I got there.
Ooh.
So I didn't get that interview.
Hmm.
Um, but it was hard to track down people that were still around to do interviews. But a lot of the people that I did that knew him, they, were very helpful, and very forthcoming, and, would answer questions and do, things like that. So yeah, that's the only one that I think of was like, oh, I missed it, by a
Right.
day.
Right.
Not the Paul Marco
And did I
interview.
read correctly? Did Paul Marco, before you tried to interview him, didn't he say that I like threaten a lawsuit, or that you might get in trouble doing this book or something? What was that about?
Yeah, the first time I contacted him, I called him on the phone because my friend had given me his number,
Right.
and I was like, "Yeah, I'm working on this." And this is when I was doing it as like a biopic, similar to Tim Burton's Ed Wood. And yeah, he got real cranky and said, "You don't have no right to do that. You never knew him. You'll have to get the rights to do it." And I was like, "Okay, this isn't going well." So I'm like, "All right, well, I'll talk to you later." And he just said, "Yeah, I'll talk to you later," and then hung up. And then I didn't get to talk to him later.
Wow. Um, Now, did you ever consult with or talk to Tim Burton at all, or was that not necessary for what you're
No,
doing?
well, I would have liked to, but it's hard to get a hold of,
Right.
hard
I
to get an
figured,
interview.
so that would.
I did speak with Jeffrey Jones, who portrayed Criswell in the Ed Wood movie briefly.
Right.
Um, and then he contacted me with a gentleman named Vern Langdon,
Hmm.
who spent a lot of time in LA, knew Mae West, and met Criswell through Mae West and things like that. So it was a good contact that way, and that's how I got in touch with a few people, was via other people. They say, "Hey, you should talk to so and so because they met him, or they,
Hmm.
like him, or are interested."
Right. Um, Going back to celebrities, we mentioned Mae West and everything. There was also photos of him with like Liberace and stuff. Was he friends with him as well?
He was, yeah, and they hung out together quite a bit.
Okay.
And then that kind of came from the television thing because Liberace was there in the early television as well.
Okay.
And yeah, they there's photos of like Liberace and Criswell and Liberace's mom, at a fundraiser, things like that. Another person was Corla Pandit, who was an
Oh
early
yeah, yeah.
television guy with the turban and playing the mystic music stuff. They were friends as well because of early television.
Right. I
Hmm.
found out just as an aside, he wasn't Indian, he was African American,
Yes.
which I don't think anybody knew back in the day, but it was some other show that was talking about it, and because my dad grew up in the Southern California area, so
Hmm.
he knew of all these little shows. There's also like Time for Beanie and things like that, and so he mentioned there used to be this Indian guy that would play the organ, and his name was Corla Pandit. And I go, what? That doesn't it? They're desperate for TV, I guess, back then for different
Hmm.
shows. So,
Yeah, it
uh,
was the early days. They were just trying whatever to see, what would stick, what's going to bring in the viewers.
mhm. Now, what happened in Criswell's later career up until his death? I think he died in 1982. Is that correct?
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
correct. Yeah, 1982. Well, he kind of hung on tenuously to his celebrity, through the 60s and early 70s. Like I said, doing Carson and Jack Parr, and then Merv Griffin, Mike Douglas shows. He did a lot of that. He continued writing for newspapers. His column was still in newspapers, National Enquirer, and things like that
Mhm.
up through the 70s. Um, about the mid 70s to late 70s when his health started failing. He had some strokes and things like that. Was in a wheelchair for a time as well. So, and then at that time he was laying low pretty much, the last half of the 70s up until his death.
Mhm.
But he stayed up active until, as long as he could, keeping the Criswell predictions going.
Mhm. Did he ever have any later in life plans, or was he just kind of content doing, the columns and the predictions and the TV appearances and stuff like that?
I think he was content with that. He did make claims that he was going to travel across the country on a tour, speech, doing speeches and doing predictions, but I never found any hard evidence of that happening. There's another one of his claims of things that he
Right.
was going to do.
Let me see what else I got on here. Is I you've said most of the stuff that's on here. I actually printed out Wikipedia just in case that I need a little bit of help,
Oh, yeah.
which you know, and it's kind of funny. The only other long time psychic that I can think of that kind of is similar to Creswell, but maybe not so campy, I guess is the word. I don't know. And I think he's still with us is the amazing Kreskin, and
Mhm.
because I don't know how legit all of his predictions are either, but did they ever encounter each other or anything like that? Or did he ever
They
encounter any other psychics in his travels or anything they did over the years?
No, Kreskin. I interviewed Kreskin for the book
Uh-huh.
quite some time ago,
Hmm.
and he had never met him. He kind of saw him as just as an entertainment value, like from being on Carson and things like that. That people really didn't take him seriously, didn't take Criswell seriously. And Kreskin, he doesn't really do predictions. He considered himself a mentalist and maybe ESP a little bit and be able to read your mind and things like that. So it's not really the same.
Well, here's something I can ask about. It says right here that he recorded a long playing record, "Your Incredible Future," and it was later released on on CD. Did you ever obtain a copy of that? And did it say anything any different than, say, like the predictions book or anything else you've read, or is it more of the same?
It's a lot of the same. It came out in 1969, the same year as his first book. So a lot of the predictions and things, not all of them, but I'd say 50% of it are pretty much straight from the book.
Hmm.
That book of predictions from the same year. Yeah, and I got the CD copy of it first off of eBay, and then eventually I got a copy of the album on an
Hmm.
eBay auction as well. And actually, eBay is where I found quite a lot of information in old magazines and newspapers, things like that, photos and stuff like that. Some of his books, then you can go on eBay and there's his books are listed on there as well. So
Hmm.
eBay was kind of a research resource for this
Yes.
as well.
Hmm. And as far as photos go, did you ever get any actual photos, or was it just all from the internet, or did somebody send you different things to use for the book?
Some of the photos I got, like I was saying, off of eBay, like promotional stills and things like that. Some of him, like I mentioned earlier, of him and Liberace together, him and Eddie Fisher
Oh yeah,
together.
Eddie Fisher's a
A
good look too.
backstage photo of the at the television station, things like that. Pretty rare stuff there. And then a couple of other people contributed as well, photos. A gentleman named Jason Insulesco.
Hmm.
He was Paul Marco's nephew. And
Oh.
after Paul Marco passed away, he ended up with all his stuff. And Paul Marco saved everything pretty much. So there was a lot of good photos that came out of that. A lot of photos of Criswell and excuse me, Paul Marco together as well.
Mm.
And then a couple of the photos are from the state of Kathy Wood, Ed Wood's wife, as well. So, and there's a lot of original stuff there that you're not going to find them on the internet. You know,
Hmm. Did Criswell have any children or anything, or no?
no, they never
Okay.
had any children. Him and his wife,
Okay.
and he was pretty much the end of his line.
Hmm.
Of his side of his family.
And what was she like, though, his wife? I mean, uh did she, I don't know much anything about her really. So did she pass away before or after him?
After him,
Okay.
and they separated in about 1972, and
Mm,
around that time, her father passed away,
mm,
and she was from Pennsylvania, and so she went back to Pennsylvania, and her father was fairly well to do in the town they lived in called Littleton,
mm,
Pennsylvania. And so she moved back and moved into the family home then
mm,
and left Criswell for 20 years prior to that, from the mid 50s. They had a fourplex apartment complex in Hollywood.
mhm,
There's like Selma and Cherokee Avenue there, which they lived in for quite a while. But she moved back east. He stayed in the apartments until she sold it because it was actually owned by her.
mm,
Um, so, and then after that, after she left, he and sold the apartment building. He started living with an employee of his, and it was also his chauffeur as well. And
mhm,
so they were cohabitating there up until his death.
mhm. Now, did she remarry at all or no?
No, no,
Okay. Okay.
she
Oh,
just moved back to Pennsylvania.
and did
Hmm.
they actually get a divorce, or did they just separate?
She divorced him.
Oh, okay.
And
Okay.
I think part of that was because I think she was fearing that if she passed away before Criswell did, that he would end up with her inheritance. I think that
Uh,
was part of the. It was a financial divorce.
yeah, sounds like it. So this book, who publishes it? And you said that you went around to different publishers. I mean, was overall the reception good, and you just ended up where you ended up? What, tell us how you got the book sold to a publisher, as it were.
Well, like I said, I took like 2 months during COVID, and I said, okay, after this 2 months, I'm going to start sending out the proposals to publishers. And
Hmm.
I sent out about 15 proposals and got three responses back. One was from a major publisher who said, okay, change this, do this, and things like that, and send it back to us, and we'll have a look at it. Another publisher said, yeah, I might be interested. And then the publisher I ended up going with was Head Press.
Right.
They're
You
called
just
Head Press, and they're out of the UK. Um, and he gave me a lot of the same editorial advice as that major publisher, but and also a better offer financially as well. Whereas the major publisher offered no advance, nothing, and at least the Head Press offered an advance. And I really liked working with Dave Karekis, the editor. He was really helpful on just shaping it up into something that could be published, and good editorial advice as well.
hmm think I have one thing published by Head Press. It wasn't really directly related. I did a book on Cracked magazine once,
Oh yeah.
and they did an interview with me. So it was a different book, but it was published by Head Press. So that's my
Oh, okay.
peripheral little
Oh, nice.
connection to
Mm-hmm.
that. So I was aware of the publisher when you said that. So how if people were to get your book, how do they get your book?
They can go Amazon's the quickest and easiest.
Mhm.
And right now I think it's like $1.50 off the cover price, which the cover price is 27.95, and I think it's 25 something right now. So there's a slight discount on Amazon on it right now. Um, that's the easiest way. You can order it through Barnes and Nobles. Most any bookstore can order it.
Mhm.
And then you can also go to the Head Press website. They have a special edition hardback copy available from Head Press
Okay.
there.
And is it available like all formats then? Hardback, paperback, ebook?
Yes,
Okay.
and Kindle.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the hardback though is only available through the Head Press website.
Got it.
Ordered through them.
Okay. And then are you making any personal appearances to publicize the book other than on a podcast like this?
I've been trying.
Okay.
It's tough. I don't know if Criswell is just not enough of the part of the zeitgeist,
Yeah.
that's needed to, because I've contacted a lot of bookstores and tried to set up some signings and things, and nothing's really panned out yet. So I did do a book release party in Hollywood at Bordner's
Hmm.
there the day after the book came out, and that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So, but
Actually,
yeah, I'm working on it.
what you might try is some of the horror conventions because since
Hmm.
it has the connection to Ed Wood and things like that, I think people would be interested for that reason. So
Yeah, that's a
um,
good idea. Yeah.
there's different magazines that are distributed at Barnes and Noble that like Rue Morgue and Monster Bash doesn't come out there, but Monster Memories and all these
Hmm.
different ones, Scary Monsters, and even today I was over there and they have a new issue of Castle of Frankenstein. But
Oh, wow.
it's a different publisher and different editor from the old version, but
Hmm. Yeah.
but they always promote different um, horror movie conventions and things like that are around the country. So
Yeah, I'll look into that. The whole horror monster kid thing is really blowing up right now. Like,
yes,
all those magazines you mentioned, there's just more and more, and there's tons
yeah,
of those out there now and
yeah.
becoming
Well,
very popular.
for me, that's the only type of magazines I still buy because,
Right.
I mean, they get magazines are pretty expensive these days, but
Yes.
I love those, the old photos and everything like that. So I'm
Hmm.
willing to splurge $10 or whatever for
Yeah.
some new stuff. Um, where are you located? Yeah.
I'm in Phoenix, Arizona.
Oh
That's
wow, I
where I
didn't
live.
expect
Yeah.
that. Okay. So,
I'm
yeah.
originally from Oklahoma. I
Oh
grew up
wow.
in
Okay.
Oklahoma City, and I've been living in Phoenix here for about the last 5 years.
Got it. Okay. And now that this book has come out, hopefully you can drum up business and make it a success. But do you have any other book ideas that you've contemplated since this?
I do. I have a few ideas working. I have one. I'm probably about halfway through it right now, working on it. I've got some interviews to do for it as
Okay.
well.
Hmm.
Um,
Is it something you can disclose, or is it still secret? You don't have to mention
sure, yeah, I can disclose it. I don't know
it.
if
Okay.
it's gonna, if I'll ever sell it. I've pitched it a couple of times to an agent and stuff, and he
Uh-huh.
said no, nobody was going to buy this. But it's about John Gilmore, who was a L.A. writer. He
Hmm.
wrote a book called Laid Bare, where he claims that he had sex with James Dean. He wrote a couple of other James Dean books. He wrote a book about Marilyn Monroe. He
Hmm.
wrote a book about Charles Manson. He's called a true crime noir writer. And I met him through my research for Criswell. He claimed that he knew Ed Wood and Vampira and Criswell and all of these things, and sent me some really good stories, which are in the book. But in later years, I started to realize that I think he made those stories up, that it didn't actually happen.
Aw.
um, so that intrigues me about him. And I had dinner with him one night. Super nice guy, pretty helpful, and things like that. But he made these claims that he was friends with James Dean, intimate with James Dean, and things like that. And I found no evidence that he may have met James Dean one time,
Right.
and that's about it. And he makes a lot of other claims of with celebrities and things like that he knew intimately and things like that. And he was he proclaimed to be a nonfiction writer, but I think a lot of it was fiction. He kind of made up these stories. So
It's too bad.
that's a project I'm working on right now.
Okay.
Like I said, I don't know, if it'll sell.
Never know. I mean, if you,
Yeah,
I've seen different books on different subjects, but it's always, how well you write them. And, sometimes it
true.
works,
Hmm.
looking through the Criswell book, it's like, I like that format, where you just have, story and then some interview clips and then more
Well,
story and,
hmm.
and then predict some of his predictions, and you made it easy to read by having it like in a different font and stuff like that. So I don't know if you were in charge of the formatting or if that was something Head Press suggested, or how'd that work?
Well, no, that was kind of the way I wrote it because I like that format as well.
Okay.
There's the Ed Wood biography, Nightmare of Ecstasy, and it was kind of like that. It was basically, though, just quotes, from people,
Yeah.
from interviews and things like that. And it kind of told the story of Ed Wood that way. And I like that format. And I also like having, newspaper quotes, things like that, short little stories and things. And I think it makes it an easier read. I think instead of just text, 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 like,
Right.
you know, and it makes it a little more fun to read. And you can jump around in it too. You could open it up and go, okay, read this a little bit. You don't have to follow it along.
Hmm.
Um, although I've seen that format. Head Press released another book recently called "Who Cares Anyway." It's a history of San Francisco punk rock,
Hmm.
and it's kind of in the same format as well.
Hmm. Okay. Well, I don't know if I have any more questions, but I'll have you do one last plug. So, what is the full title of the book? And we already said where you can get it, but
It's called Fact Fictions in the Forbidden Predictions of the Amazing Criswell.
all right.
And, my name is Edwin Lee Canfield. So if you just look that up on Amazon, you'll find it there.
Okay.
Yep.
And if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, if they had questions or anything like that, what's the best way to do that?
I have a Forbidden Predictions on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all the major social media platforms, and they can message me on there. And yeah, I'd be glad you. One thing is that I'm getting more information about Criswell now that the book is out. People read and go, "Oh yeah, I knew him," or "I knew somebody that knew him," or "I have this story." So it's kind of the stories keep coming in
Right.
on it, and that's one thing I was hoping would happen.
Yeah.
That I'd find out even more after they put the book out.
Well, do you think if you get enough information, you might do a second revised version or maybe a different book?
I would like to do a revised version. I think a revised version would be good. And I could think,
Okay.
I've pretty much got enough right now that I could do one, but it's a little early.
Yeah. Yeah.
The book has only been
It
out for a
happens.
few months
I
now,
know
so a
that
little early to do a
as soon as
revision
you put out the book
already.
and it's like, no more
Yeah,
information,
stop, wait, hold to
you know,
stop the presses.
yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I would hope to do that at some point with all the new information as well.
Very good. I hope I won't ask you to reveal that, but it's like I hope it's like something really good that would justify a second printing.
Some of it is.
Oh, that's
Yep,
good.
some of it I've already found out is.
All right. Well, I wanted to thank you for being my special guest, Ed Canfield.
Sure,
And,
thank you.
I didn't really know much about Criswell. So, with your book as it is, and, with our little discussion here, I'm going to have to investigate him further.
Sure, great.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Well, I want to thank you for being a guest today on the Fun Ideas
Thanks for having me.
podcast. And we will see you next time on Fun Ideas Podcast. Thank you very much.